In this next episode, we talk to Ben Shalom, founder and CEO of BOXXER. Ben has done something quite incredible, which is break into the boxing promotional industry and is the first person to do it since the 1970s. He started out at 23 with £10,000 and is now, at the age of 30, built a business worth £25 million with exclusive contracts with Sky Sports in the UK and NBC in America. As he explains, the boxing industry is quite a strange place, actually, and really it is devoid of brands, something he recognized and is trying to build a brand now and has done very successfully, which is based on more than the usual big name stars for big money fights. Let's hear his story and how he managed to do it. Hello and welcome to Business Without Bullshit. We're here to help the millions upon millions of small business owners navigate this crazy world, aren't we, Pippa?
Yes.
And I'm Andy Orion. Alongside me is my co-host, Pippa Sturt.
Hi, Andy.
Ben, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Nice office as well, I was saying. Beautiful.
Thanks, ma'am. Thanks. My mum will particularly appreciate that. She
will.
was the interior designer here. Go, mum. There you have it from Ben himself. That is a mad stat. There's been no boxing promoters. And I always think when I see them, they're really young. There's one who's a father and then his son does it.
Yeah, I think it's usually like a hereditary...
Like a family position thing.
Yeah, it passes down
You know
through
how
many generations.
you work here?
Yeah, all right. Nepotism. Yeah, it's got its upside.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah.
His
My
dad.
grandfather started this business.
Really?
Yeah.
So you're not here on merit then?
I'm not.
No, I'm
and
only
frankly,
joking.
no, I'm not. And frankly, everyone, no one would employ me ever. But I might look. I love boxing, but my knowledge is probably pretty crap. But I
bet it's better than mine.
There's a British guy who he can't. It must be later since the 1970s. Who's the son of someone who's huge.
So you've got Frank Warren.
Yes, it.
And you've got Barry Hearn, and Barry and Frank's sons work in the business. Eddie Hearn and George Warren and usually, I mean, in the US as well, you've got a guy called Bob Arum, and his stepson runs the business there. And
so you're the first person, not including them. You're the first person with that nepotism because they must have come in.
There's been, I think, to have got to the level that we've got to. It's definitely been when I decided to go into boxing, it wasn't really a career. There wasn't a career path there. So it was an interesting choice. But yeah, it's a crazy game to get into, particularly with how many doors are shut.
How did you, or why did you decide to go into boxing? Like, it doesn't seem like a usual career choice.
No, I think, look, I was always running businesses growing up. I was quite restless as a kid, and whether it was just the typical businesses you do to get started, but eventually got into events, and I was running music events and student nights, and that's usually the typical way a normal promoter will start.
Oh, okay.
And then it got to the end of my studies, and I always knew that I didn't want to ever have to get a job. And boxing for me was something, especially in Manchester, I would say it's a second sport to football. You know, I grew up when Ricky Hatton was filling out arenas and Amir Khan as well. So it's a big deal in Manchester, and for me it was the simplicity of the sport, in the sense that I was around fighters that would work extremely hard, were really resilient, but never knew when their opportunity was coming. It's one of the hardest sports in the world like that. It's not all meritocratic. It's not who's the best will rise to the top.
Is it not?
No.
Is it just luck?
A lot of it's a luck. Of course you've got to work hard, but the opportunities need to come at the right time. You've got to essentially have the right trainer and be in the right setup and know the right people, especially to get going. But it's a brutal sport. And so I was around that, but the integrity and the discipline and the humility and all the things that you want to learn as a kid, you can learn in a boxing gym. It's a place where it really does change lives. And so I had friends that wanted to be professional boxers, were getting into professional boxing. But from a business point of view, I always just saw it as a sport without a language barrier that could export globally. That in the modern world, short form content was thriving, and boxing is an explosive sport at the best of times, and produces a huge amount of viral moments and clips. And so I think it was doing events, being from Manchester, going to boxing shows where it was an intimidating place to be. You know, it's a sport that's always shrouded in murkiness, and it wasn't the type of place that I would take my mum or my girlfriend to a show. And I always thought it's how unfair perhaps it was on the boxers that we couldn't get the biggest brands involved in the sport. We couldn't get the biggest broadcasters involved in the sport. And it came from a place where, to me, it was the greatest sport in the world, but they were let down by the business of boxing. And so although the sport itself was probably the truest form of combat and sport, that the business wasn't like that, and it always seemed to let itself down. And so I just saw so many problems but so much opportunity in putting on events with a glass ceiling that I was doing, where it was only the amount of tickets you could sell. It wasn't exporting content, and a combination of seeing the scale of boxing around the world.
So you're 23. Yeah. These are your events you're putting on in Manchester.
Did you ever box yourself? Or?
No. So this is the thing. I could never dream of being a boxer. You know, I could never relate to the talent that they have and the discipline and the courage that they have. But that's why I think I found it so easy to work in the sport, because you are surrounded by people, even how impossible your dream might seem. Surrounded by people that have a lot tougher than you, no matter what you're going through in business. And so I was able to start 22, 23, helping local promoters. I did everything from sponsorship to broadcasting to press conferencing setup to counting tickets, everything. And so really understood. And I think that was what allowed me to break in where perhaps others hadn't. And I'd say for anyone getting into business, it's okay to look at a business and think you understand it, but you got to get under the bonnet and actually work out how the business ticks.
How it makes money.
How it really works, because it sometimes seems obvious from the outside, but it's not. And those early years of working in the grassroots of the sport, the lower end of the sport, and learning harsh lessons along the way. You know, it's a brutal sport in the ring, but it's an even more brutal sport outside of the ring. I was able to realize what maybe it would take to break into the sport. Luckily, I had naivety on my side, and I was young, and I didn't have to provide for a family, and I could take a long-term approach. And there's a lot of people that come into boxing and want to throw as much money as possible, but that doesn't work. And it's proven that time and time again. And so it started from humble beginnings, I guess, and never really took shortcuts, and eventually managed to build a
by
fairly
thinking
successful
big,
business.
I would guess. And actually, the way you're talking about it, because I've put on lots of events and ran record labels and shit, because music is my passion. But the thing that would drive me is you see really good musicians, and then you're like, fuck, we got to get this shit out. You know, we need to put something, you know, we need to get gigs. What do we need to do? That sounds like it's for you. You're like, these boxers are amazing, or this fight is amazing. Why is it not on a bigger scale or bigger TV, whatever?
Yeah, look, boxing, when it's big, is one of the biggest sports in the world. It grosses more than anything else. Those big events are just enormous. You know, the big pay-per-view events, the most famous sportsmen in history are usually from a fighting background. Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson, guys that will go throughout history.
Sorry, the only other boxer I can think of is Chris Eubank.
Chris Eubank, yeah.
Lennox Lewis.
We're involved with this.
Frank Bruno.
Oh, so you do know them? You do know
yeah,
them.
but only from like the 1970s and
Pippa,
80s.
during this entire podcast, is going to occasionally name boxers she's heard of.
You have to, I
This is
can't
all
believe
from my
you didn't know
childhood.
Ricky Hatton.
I'm
Yeah,
really sorry.
He was a big deal. Did he go
Was
to
it? But if you get the gig promoting something, and when you were coming up and you got the gigs to promote something, are you effectively taking that gig away from somebody else? Is there a lot of competition?
There is competition and it's fierce, but I think it's trying to look at yourself, right? You hardly can name a boxer.
Yeah,
you probably
true.
never watched a fight in your life.
Yeah, that is accurate.
And for us, the challenge and the business purpose is to make boxing more accessible, make it more easier to understand, make it more transparent, make it more relatable. And as I said, it has no language barrier. We have events that are sold in over 150 countries in the world. There's not many sports that are that easily understood.
But sports don't involve talking or usually. I mean,
no,
you
but
know.
you look at, say, soccer, You look at NFL, you look at basketball. They're
What's
usually
the language barrier? They're kicking balls.
the fact is that they're popular and they're played in certain countries. Whilst boxing, you can find a boxing ring in any country in the world, and is one of the oldest sports in the world. And so our challenge and our whole business purpose isn't to try and take business from other promoters, is to try and grow the sport and try and take it out of this sort of the dark ages of the murkiness and then the intimidating aspects and the fact that you've never watched a fight in your life. To
be fair, I know the rules of the ancient Greek pancration, which is where boxing came from.
Right.
Where the only thing you were not allowed to do was kill your opponent.
God, well, you can do that in boxing, sadly, and then no one wants to. I find boxing, there's just a fascination about it from so many directions. It's like, it's sort of extremely, there's a beauty to it. There's like a real confinement to it. I mean, it's a very violent sport, but it's like, it's a bit like football. It's like, okay, hands only, these are the rules of engagement. And I think, I don't know what percentage of people just are like, it's barbaric, I want nothing to do with it. But even, and I love watching it, but even me, and maybe we all feel it's the gladiator thing. You get these moments when you're like, fucking people are like killing each other,
And look, for me, boxing done properly and the British Boxing Board of Control in this country are one of the best. And so medically, you couldn't ask for a better governing body and authority. I know boxing's always struggled with that criticism, but I cannot overstate what it does for inner city kids, what it does for deprived communities. Most boxers come from the worst possible places in society, and they're literally fighting their way out for a better life. And the beauty of the sport, some of the strongest and best relationships in sport are formed within that ring. It's a sport, of course, that comes with its dangers, as do all sports.
I was about to say,
rugby,
we don't watch skiing and go, this is awful.
Correct, but there's nowhere to hide as well with boxing, and you have footballers that might turn up one week and might not the next week. You have different sportsmen that maybe don't have to have the discipline and the integrity that I think that's the word that fighters have to have. There's no shortcuts, and there is a beauty to it, and it is a sport, and it is a real form of skill, and it's for me, it's always just been about trying to translate that to a wider audience, allowing them to understand the sport and allowing them to see what good it does as well. And because it's not.
How do you do that? Like, ultimately, they ding a bell. The rules are very fixed. Someone's going to hit each other. So it's how you frame it.
Yeah, I think people don't understand the multiple belt systems, and people don't understand, the long-winded undercards and what's happening before the main fight. And there's a lot to unpick with boxing. It's a fragmented sport because it's so old, and because it's in every country in the world. It's fragmented, and so our challenge is to try and simplify it over time, to try and make it easier to engage with, to try and make it shorter.
Is it older than anything? Is it sort of like in England they were boxing before they were sort of organising football? Because it is a super old sport like that, because it's such a natural. I was listening about it the other day, cock baiting and dog baiting, and they would fight anything.
Bear baiting, you forgot bear baiting.
I mean, in London, that's all they used to do. They'd be like, "Oh, you've got a nasty dog. I've got this."
They definitely did other stuff
I've got this
as well.
cat over here that
fair.
could rip your face off. Let's chuck him in a pit and see who dies. I mean, it's unbelievable what I used to get up to. But there's something in it, isn't there? There's some fascination in it.
All sport is entertainment at the end of the day, and that's what produces the wages. The TV money ultimately is what drives all sport, and boxing is no different. Boxing is about entertaining people. And so for us, when we started the business, we founded it on 4 principles: innovation, entertainment, transparency, and diversity. And all we're trying to do is to bring those 4 elements, as I say, to one of the oldest sports in the world. That's why it's called BOXXER. Our biggest sell into broadcasters and to sponsors is when they say, "Oh, we don't really get involved in boxing." We have to sell them that this isn't boxing. BOXXER is going to stand for something new in the sport and transparent and innovative and diverse. We're the biggest exporter of women's boxing in the world. We have the biggest women's stable in the world. And for me, if women can fight, then there's not much women can't do. You know, it's a real powerful statement and it's a powerful image. And I think for us, the whole concept and the whole brand is to take boxing into the next generation.
That's a great pitch. And is that how, I mean, Ben standing there at 23 years old, what did you do to start like thinking big and picking up the phone to bigger people and saying, we're this?
I think for me, I was always struck by the lack of brands in the sport.
Right.
You know, you can't.
What, you mean Nike brands? Like
No,
whatever.
like-
No, but you can name those promoters, but there's no brand
There's
behind
no
anything,
brand.
is there?
And like, if say for mixed martial arts, you might have heard of the UFC.
Yeah.
With wrestling, you've heard of WWE
Yeah.
or WWF. And they have these big organizations that represent something in the sport.
That's true. There aren't brands for boxing.
No,
It's
and-
who's fighting is the brand.
Correct. And that's what we wanted to focus on. How can we make the sport interesting? Because rather than just big when Tyson Fury or Anthony Joshua's fighting, because that's the challenge that it's always had. It's always about who's fighting, and not watching the sport and not enjoying the sport and not understanding the sport. And so for us, that's the
It's
long-term
amazing,
vision.
Don King, that, you know, supposed master of marketing, whatever else people might say about him, didn't establish a brand, or the brand is Don King. Then,
The fairness, he was the brand, and he was
Yeah.
that good at it. And there's other promoters that work like that. That just wasn't what we wanted to do. I think everyone has, for us, you need a brand to really. I always was concerned about, well, how could the business survive without me?
Yeah.
You
To
know?
rally behind.
Yeah, how can the business
Succession planning.
So, and just having something that a real business. If the business is dependent on me, it's not a real business.
Yeah. Well, we have that here. My old man, you know, my granddad started, my old man built it up, and, you know, for decades now, I've been, you know, he's still with us, thankfully, still working away. But yeah, you know, it's been like, Dad, the brand is basically been your principles, and you're a cool guy. And now it's like, we've got to transfer them into this brand. But I think British people, we struggle to think big. And, you know, even myself, I caveat even to this day, okay, I'm going to say something annoying and American, but we've got to talk about our brand and what it represents. So, you know, you seem to have quite a clear thing to think big and be ambitious and not be all sort of like, oh, well, it's never going to work out.
Well, to be honest, it was out of necessity, because I just remember going insane when I couldn't think big. Like I had times where, and then, even when I was doing the events, the music event, I was too restless. I'd find myself losing my mind. I couldn't stay in a box, and it was always like this doesn't feel it's boring me. I need
ADHD.
a glass ceiling. Don't tell me about it. But it was always like, how do I work on something that feels like it's limitless? We can go, and so for me, it's not been, can it work? It's just been a necessity, almost for sanity, really.
So what will be the kind of end goal? Where will you be happy with it ending up? Where do you see it?
I know it's like weird, and people talk about visualization and where you want to get to. Maybe rightly or wrongly, I've never thought about that. I've thought about building the brand into a bigger place as possible, and thinking big and never taking shortcuts and never taking easy wins, and just thinking and keeping it open, keeping my dream alive. Because the moment, you know, you corner yourself, that's when I do struggle. So, but I've never thought about what the end point is, if I'm honest. I've always felt like we just got to keep opening doors and building as big as possible. And luckily, as I say, with boxing, it's amazing. We get to travel the world. There's no language barrier. You meet the craziest people, the most interesting people. And it's culturally, you know,
They're a friendly bunch,
well.
like.
You meet, it's like it's a melting pot. You meet all sorts of people, and
But some industries I find are more hilarious, like food and drink industry, full of a lot of people who like to eat and drink. Fashion industry, miserable. You know, a music industry, I think it's 50% people who are narcissists, 50% people with ADHD. And so basically 50% of the people I love most in the world and 50% of the people I don't. Maybe they both have, you know, maybe boxing's like that.
Boxing is a interesting sport because ultimately it comes from deprived areas, it comes from grassroots, and there's not really there's no exam, there's no admissions test.
Is that true? There's no posh fighters. There's no rich fighters.
No, Of course there are, but I'm saying you get real, you get real salt of the earth characters, and you also get all sorts of people, and it is interesting. I've always been fascinated by people, and I think that's why I'm attracted to this business as well, more than anything. And so, yeah, boxing certainly gives you a wide perspective on people.
Do you think you've got to be? I always think with boxing, that sort of mentality, you've not got to just come from nothing. You need some scars. Like there's something you I don't want to say boxers have mental health issues in a negative way. I mean, I think we all go through shit as we grow up, and it's someone who's had something really hard, like, maybe around their dad or something. So there's an anger, or there's a...
Yes and no. I think it's a place where whether you're a boxer or whether you just work in boxing, it does toughen you up. I think I'm grateful for the time that, especially when I started, because you go through things and you see things and you have to experience things that do, develop you a lot quicker. I think people that work in boxing, and boxers in particular, probably experience the extremes of life in a much more HD version than anyone
Getting
else.
Their ass kicked.
Highs and lows are intense, very intense. It's almost, there's no safety barrier. There's no cushion. It is raw brutality.
There's no 0-all, is there? There's kind of, that was a lovely boxing fight this afternoon. Yeah. That's really leveled me out.
Is there not? Do you not get draws?
Well, you do quite often, I imagine, actually.
You do, but I think it's just as I say, the intensity of the sport, the highs and lows in the sport is pretty, is a good lesson in life.
So there's no big master plan. You're just building this brand. You've moved to London, go to America. Is that what you do?
We obviously did our first US broadcast deal last year with NBC, who are a massive network.
And how often do they put you on? Or what does that mean?
we export all our shows now onto their Peacock platform. They'll have Premier League and WWE on there, and we're looking at now with them doing our first shows in the US, and they're owned by Comcast, who also owns Sky Sports over here. So as I say, we have relationships now. We've done shows in France. We've done shows in Albania, Poland.
Is you've got to find the talent? Or?
So this is probably been our business difference. Is we've never focused on talent. Boxers come and go, and a lot of people can come into boxing and focus, right, I need this boxer, and that will open that door, and that will open this door. We've just tried to think, how can we become the best boxing rights holder? How can we become the trusted partner of the broadcasters and the sponsors?
Rights being the rights to broadcast.
We want to become the biggest boxing rights holder in the world. And so we want a Sky Sports or an NBC to go, well, you know what? We like their values. We like what the brand stands for. We can get on board with that, because there's a lot of times where broadcasters will go, you know what? It's more hassle than it's worth, this boxing. It causes so many headaches. It's hard to schedule.
What's the headaches? It's hard to schedule.
It's hard to schedule, hard to predict.
What do you do? So the normal setup is chat. This is what they've done, blah, blah, blah. You approach it differently? You have someone explaining it at the start? Or
we just try and broaden. So whether it's the talent that we use on the night, whether it's we actually started with an 8-man tournament concept, and we still use that today, where 8 fighters fight on one night, quarterfinal, semi-final, final, big cash prize.
It.
And it's just an entertainment show.
Wow.
Because it's almost like, well, how can we enter the market? How can we make this exciting? And then you don't need to know who the fighter is. No. You're just fascinated by 8 stories all culminating on one night, with one winning his dream prize and becoming...
So one of them will fight 4 fights, is it?
They'll look 3 fights in a night, quarterfinal, semi-final.
How long does that take?
3-minute rounds, 3-minute rounds, and the thing that's what a lot of sports now are doing is like, how can we think of shorter formats? Yeah. How can we keep the attention span?
Just do it on points most of the time.
Yeah, no, knockouts do happen in those tournaments. We actually started where we never had broadcast money, so we had to create concepts that would generate ticket and sponsorship revenue. That's how we started, and so every fighter would have a different color. It would be like green, blue, red, yellow.
Green.
We'd have big gambling partners involved, and that's actually how we entered into the market, and that's where it became pretty. That's where it started being pretty brand.
It's such a nice, simple solution to break out of this sort of pattern of main act, put on. They do it more like a music show. We'll have I don't know, Madonna, and then we'll put on the support. Is it true? Because you were talking about the safety and British boxing being safe and stuff. I remember reading ages ago that the gloves made boxing more dangerous. That if you fight someone bare knuckles, your face is actually stronger than the hand and will break your hand.
They do talk about, I think if you look at any disasters that have ever happened over the years, it's the latter rounds. Because as you said, if you're a resilient fighter and you're taking repeated punishment because of the glove, and then it's going into the 8th, the 9th, the 10th, the 11th, the 12th, and you're still standing, that's where usually the damage happens. And that's why the shorter formats, it's another benefit for that.
Okay. Good. Yeah, that they call it something. I remember seeing some images of brains recently. Have you seen what happens to me when you get regular concussed?
No.
Oh, it's awful. It changes your personality. Yeah, it happened to Henry VIII, that's what they reckon happened to him. Well, not boxing. I think he got hit by a javelin or something. He went mad. Yeah, you could go mad just like that. You could get like someone smack you one.
Also, the greatest thing about Henry VIII is the whole exploding in his coffin thing.
He exploded in his coffin?
What do you mean?
It's like, he was immensely fat by the time he died. And they put him in his coffin and he kind of popped.
Oh my God.
Really? Mm-hmm. Wow.
You know you've overdone it.
That's really, yeah. Yeah, it's a heavy one.
What do you think the biggest problem facing boxing is?
Broadcasters. The reason boxing's doing well at the moment is multiple broadcasters are involved.
Right.
The challenge is keeping them interested and making sure that they want to show boxing rather than cricket or rather than tennis or rather than this. And as I say, boxing comes with its challenges for broadcasters. It's not as simple as buying 38 Premier League games and then you can chill out for a few years before the rights come out.
There's not much content to start with, is it?
No, there's a lot. We do 16 shows a year, but there's a lot more to it. You don't know who's going to be fighting when. Anything can happen. Injuries, main event gets pulled, event gets pulled. The
That's impossible for them changing the day.
Lack of transparency, perhaps with the governance and the fragmentation.
But you're saying it's their fault. Or they're the biggest problem.
I'm saying the problem is their interest dwindling, or that it is all about broadcast interest and keeping them invested in the sport. That's the only way the biggest sport survives now.
And people clearly like watching it because, like when I talked about you to my roommates upstairs, they went absolutely mental. It's clearly like lots of people love watching it.
It's huge. It's huge. I mean, digitally, boxing's now performing. I think there was an EY study. It's like number 2 second sport digitally at the moment in 18 to 35s. It's absolutely.
It's the only thing I watch on YouTube.
It's absolutely flying.
I mean, not for sport. I mean, but is it a lot that UFC have done that can be copied or brought across to boxing? Or?
What they had the benefit of was actually having a smaller sport that they could own. So there's one belt. So there's one champion for each weight division. It's really easy to understand, and they can sort of predict. And that's where you get, right, he's going to fight him, he's going to fight him. We can sort of see the full picture. The best fights get made at the right times. You've got a brand that stands for something that people recognize. And that's the biggest challenge boxing has. There's no uniform body. There's no singularity to it.
So what do you do? Give your belts or?
No, so we're part
what are the belts? So are they different? Like,
oh, there's loads. There's all these institutes set up.
Like different weights
you explain it better.
So over the time, there's been 4 major governing bodies.
Right.
And so you can have 4 world champions in the same weight division. So if you're, say the light heavyweight division, you can have the WBA world champion, the WBO world champion, IBF world champion. And then they have these things called unifications, where you'll have one world champion fight another and unify. And they're the real biggest fights. So it does work, and the governing bodies allow fights to happen because they enforce fights to happen. But the success, as to what you said of the UFC, has been because of the ownership of the sport. And boxing is much more popular and much more widely recognized than mixed martial arts. But there's no $1 billion brand. There's no $1 billion company in MMA and wrestling. They have that.
Yeah. And is of the 4 main ones, is what, 3 American, 1's British or something? Or?
They are actually all Latin American based or American based.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, we never came up with one.
No, unfortunately.
Not that anyone cared about.
No, we've got the British title.
Britain seems, maybe it's just because we've had a good run of it, but, we seem to be doing pretty well at boxing these days.
Yeah, it's definitely the centre of sport in many ways. The British Boxing Board of Control is probably the most respected governing body internationally. And we produce fighters all the time throughout the years. It's people call it the home of boxing a lot. And it's
the usual thing. We set the rule, Oxford rules.
Correct. I mean, we seem to own everything, but the interest here, the popularity. We have American fighters when they come over here, they can't believe it. We'll sell out. We've got a show at the O2 on Sunday.
What, do we do big shows? They do huge shows in America.
Not as regularly and not as consistently. Not as the interest. Just we did the O2 for a women's only boxing night. Sold out 20,000. Broadcast all around the world.
Wow.
Doesn't happen in the US, doesn't happen anywhere else. And so there's the interest and I think the level of interest from the fans, the fan engagement in the UK is incredible. I think it comes from tribalism, you have a fighter
piece of us
from Newcastle or a fighter from Manchester or a fighter from someone representing their hometown really does create superstars. It really does. And yeah, it's definitely the UK and leads it in that front.
There's a great guy called B. Dolan. He's an amazing American rapper and poet. But he does this thing about anyone who lives in America and is sort of a pacifist doesn't understand what this country was built on. But I think you could apply it very well to the UK. It's like if you sit sort of saying, "Oh, I'm really against all these things," it's like understand how the UK got what it got. We're a very fighting nation. I mean, on a basic level, Italians can't fight for shit, and of all everyone, the Scots.
You're just offended. Do we have any Italian listeners?
I'm okay. I'm just making generalizations. They're probably all wrong, but we can't have a conversation if we talk about every individual individually. But the Scots, they have a piece of them. I mean, they would agree with it. They have this, and it goes back through the generations. What happened to the Romans? They must have been violent bastards, and they turned into the Italians. Anyway, but there is a piece of us who like a fight, I think, and the Irish as well.
Definitely, it's tribal in the UK. People like to fight.
And I also think there's something like when I think, actually, to be fair, when I say I don't watch sport, I really enjoy tennis. And I think there's a thing about like two people fighting each other rather than a team. Like, I don't like team sports so much. I think they're a bit boring.
Yeah.
Like it's quite the idea of like two individuals really going at it.
Yeah.
It's like
psychological, mental, physical warfare.
I think Rocky too, it's just this amazing, I don't know, it's an amazing film and stuff. I mean, it's somehow, I don't know, there's like a magic to Rocky that has helped boxing, don't you think? Or
look, I think for me, boxing is very inspirational. It teaches you to get up literally when you're down. The whole sport is based around mental toughness, physical toughness, resilience, courage, everything. Yeah. And so I think for me, it's a great teacher of lessons to kids. And although people talk about the dangers of boxing, it's honestly the amount of lives that it changes is pretty incredible. And yeah, movies that are based like that obviously show it in its rawest form. But it is the truth. It is an incredible sport.
Ben, have there been any like fuck ups along the way? I mean, is there anything that you really screwed up and
we've
turned out
all sorts. I mean, signing certain fighters for far too much money.
Okay.
And then
how do you know how much money you're supposed to?
How does it work? Do you sign them on a sort of retainer or?
The key is to find a fighter that is young, that you really believe in, and that you think that you can develop him into a star. And so those are the types of fighters that you want to sign, the ones that you can have a long-term interest in and you can invest in up front. And then there's fighters that will jump around as superstars and then cost a lot of money. I think, we've had some disasters. We've had some amazing successes. I guess it's similar to the music industry. Not everyone's.
So do they need to have abilities other than just being able to hit somebody well?
So we've got
personality-wise
100%. We have a fighter called Ben Whittaker. He's had 6 fights. His last fight did 100 million video views around the world because he's a showman. He dances in the ring. He's entertaining. And sometimes it's about fighters that can transcend the sport. So you're looking for someone extremely talented, but someone that has something.
Yeah. Understands it's entertainment.
Correct. And whether that's because they talk in a certain way, sound like a certain way, behave in a certain way, or just the way they fight. you're looking for an X factor and a reason why a fan's gonna, think, oh, I'll carry on watching this.
It's a bit like, I always thought Lennox Lewis is like just like the best fighter everywhere, but he almost purposely was like, I'm not fucking, and I'm not here to, he took it very professionally as a sport. And sometimes that was very graceful in the way he acted and stuff, because he was just utterly, but he didn't do the entertainment thing and just be crazy,
Everyone's got their own thing. He might be the biggest puncher in the world. He might be the fastest boxer. So you're looking for something more. But yeah, I think, look, we've had plenty of fuck ups as with any business, plenty.
Who's helped you, or who's given you the best advice, and what was that advice?
It's difficult because when you're at 23 years old and you tell people you're going to go into the boxing industry, who's there to help you?
So they mostly say, don't do it.
Don't do it. Yeah. My parents couldn't believe it. And it was almost like, there's not that path to follow.
Your parents rang their friends saying, he's lost it, I'm really worried about
exactly. I'm sure they did. And even now they're probably, just about coming around to it. But it's hard. It was hard for me, to be honest, because I got a good amount of business advice, don't get me wrong, but there's not many.
It's not a community that wants to help each other out.
Also if it was kind of a closed shop.
Correct.
Who are you there's no mentor there.
Correct. I had to think about doing something that had never been done before in many ways, which was a challenge. So I think the main thing was, I go back to is good values and courage and resilience and finding a way and looking on, really understanding the business was probably the best advice I had. Was,
spotting they didn't have brands was much smarter than you realize, because people stare at something for 100 years and don't notice that a wall's missing or whatever.
And that can only and that's one thing, but then understanding that there's a practicality. I always think of the business in two ways. You've got the growing the brand and growing the business and doing the front work and all that, but then you've got the engine room. Not many people understand the engine room. That's the same, and you've got to really understand it. And I imagine it's the same in any business. You start a car business, you can create the best brand and the best car in the world, but if you don't understand the engineering side of things and what everyone does well and the simple principles behind the business.
Well, to manage people too, you have to understand their jobs, and to make money out of it, you have to have done their jobs, because then you can be like, it doesn't fucking take that long to do that.
Correct. Correct. You've got, and that you've got to understand it. It is true that, and that's something.
And the pennies add up to the pounds and all of that. Yeah,
you've got to really understand all the elements of it. So, that was probably one of the most difficult things.
What about the worst advice you've ever been given? Have you clearly been given some shit advice in a way?
Yeah. I think the worst I always hear is work smart. Now, I know people think work smart is smart.
Just feels like a bit jargon apart from anything else.
If you're going to start a business, you got to work hard. And you're not going to know how to work smart until you've absolutely worked hard, understand absolutely how it ticks. And the moment you take your eye off the ball, for me, and you let that complacency creep in, that's the day where problems start to happen. I don't like the word work smart.
Work smart means like have time for your family and time for. What does work smart mean?
I think work smart means
don't dick about. I think.
Well, no, I think it means the way it's always been put to me is, don't focus on the wrong things and this and this, but and take a more measured approach. And I get that, but starting a business is impossible.
It's war.
And unless you're going to commit to it wholeheartedly and everything matters and have an attention to detail, it's not a normal thing to do. No. And so you can't. For me, you can't work smart, or at least you can't work smart until you've worked really hard.
Yeah. And you won't build anything, and people are always like, "Oh, it's all right for them," and they built that thing, and it's like, you have no idea how hard they worked. They were up first, sweat, blood, push.
Yeah.
Seeing as this is business without bullshit, what is bullshit in boxing?
There's a lot of politics. Very political.
Political in how it interacts with real life, or everything. Political?
The games that go on. You wouldn't believe it. You can It's like the ultimate.
Feels like there's an HBO series coming.
Yeah.
God, I hope not.
But give us a made up if you want, just kind of example, or
it's like everything's got a spin. You know, the promoters and the managers, that everyone's it's almost like a game of chess without rules. You know, whether it's legal pressure we've had, PR pressure, financial pressure, regulatory pressure. There's a reason why it's been a closed shop, and it's because of how political it is, the relationships, the old relationships, the control of the media, the control of the broadcast systems, the
so
politics.
You'll be trying to do something and maybe someone like undermine you publicly or fuck with you in a way that you're like, what the hell was that about? You
exactly.
know? People can still fight. You've signed a fight. Does that mean what you're doing is signing exclusivity to have access to this person, is it? Or you sign them for 6 fights or...
Yeah, with fighters, you sometimes 1 fight, 2 fight exclusive deals. It really does depend, but yeah, I think that's less of an issue. As I say, it's the politics and the framework and the way things are spun.
Oh, this upstart from Manchester. Who does he think he is? This little shit who's 30, and before you know, you'll be 45, and you'll be like, I'm not young.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
So people do stuff just to screw with other people.
Yeah.
Rather than
it's skullduggery. It's like it's some. As I say, I had to grow up really fast. I know it sounds. It can be a brutal place in ways that most people might never.
You should just start fucking with people and sending them Christmas cards all the time and how much you love them.
Yeah, we do.
Just be really friendly to everyone. Yeah. Be like super like, okay, well, Ben, you've been brilliant. We're going to move on to the quickfire round. We're going to ask you some really easy questions. You're going to know the answer to them. If you don't know the answer to them, you're going to have to phone a friend, I guess. So D, cue the music and we're off.
What was your first job?
Selling loft insulation.
Ooh, very popular. That dates you actually because it was a government requirement, I think, for a while. What was your worst job?
Delivering waffles, a takeaway that was involved in.
Oh. You didn't get to eat the waffles, really?
Late nights.
People are ordering waffles late at night.
Yeah, it was called Munchies.
Oh, okay, that explains a lot.
I'm a fan of anything related to that industry.
Yeah.
Favorite subject at school?
Anything history, politics, religion based. That was me.
Yeah, I can get behind all of that.
You like religion based things?
Yeah. I actually grew up. My dad has Jewish Middle Eastern roots, and my mum's Irish Catholic, and so I was experienced to a lot of different things, and I've always been fascinated by culture.
You take your dad's name, so you sound Jewish, but actually you don't because your mum's Catholic.
Correct. It's a weird one.
Wow, that is a weird one.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that weird these days, or certainly not in London or Manchester. What's your special skill, Ben?
Seeing things clearly. Yeah. I've always, for some reason, been able to simplify complicated things.
You sound very ADHD.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the skill of that.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
I was fascinated with creating running businesses. My granddad had an off license in Belfast, and then that grew into a decent sized wine business, and I was just fascinated that he could go to work and run his own thing, and yeah, it was fascinating to me.
What did your parents want you to be?
To be fair, I know it sounds corny, but probably just happy. And yeah, when I think they'd have chosen safer options or safer.
Yeah, basically not a boxer.
Yeah, and not. I don't think they're not business people, and they just wanted me probably to play it. Well,
at least you're probably from their perspective not a boxer.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Anything's possible.
That's true.
What's your go-to karaoke song?
I've got a few, but I like Robbie Williams. I like Feel by Robbie Williams. I sometimes go to that. Oasis, obviously, when I'm really drunk because I'm from Manchester, and that usually comes out. But yeah,
you could do an excellent Oasis tribute act.
I put my arms behind.
Yeah. You've got a Robbie look.
Liam Gallagher job.
Office dogs, business or bullshit? Any dogs in the boxing?
Definitely bullshit. However, my PA does have a dog that comes in. I have to say,
So you kind of have to put up with
don't
it.
You have to
mind
say
it.
what?
I don't
Please,
mind it. I
I think
don't
you're going to have
mind
to
it.
say, please stop bringing
No, I
that.
don't mind it. I think she somehow sedated it where it doesn't make a noise, and so it's fine.
Have you ever been fired?
I was thinking about that loft insulation job. I remember my foot going through someone's roof, and I think that was my last day. So that might have been fired.
So that might have been, don't come back.
It's funny they won't bring back, they would never bring back dogfighting, would they? Because people in this country get
Where did that come from?
Well, it was such a big thing. And then I was thinking about big dogs in the office and thinking office business of boxing. I mean, it's funny, it's funny that we just won't watch animals get hurt. But anyway, I guess we can't in a way control it, can it? And what's your vice?
I like going for a meal.
That's good, with nice wine.
Nice wine.
Oh, lunch.
Yeah,
Posh, tablecloth. Don't go, this is my mum's rule. Don't go to a restaurant unless it's got a tablecloth.
Really?
Oh, really?
Oh, follow this rule. It changes your life. If you go for a nice meal, I mean,
I don't mind that. I might start
yeah,
applying
it's nice.
that. Yeah.
Because when you're like,
I'll
do I
have
go
to
there?
stop.
There's something about a tablecloth. She's quite right, nice white tablecloth. You suddenly it means the waiter's going to come to you. No tablecloth, service.
You got to be careful.
Yeah, you got to be careful. Watch out. That was excellent. You did incredibly well. So your top tips for founders or entrepreneurs, what would they be? Top 5 if you want, or whatever's on the top of your head.
Block out the noise. Think big. Know your industry really well. Attention to detail. And be careful who you surround yourself with, who you hire. It really does make a huge difference.
Man, you smashed that.
Yeah, that was excellent.
We actually need to put those 5 on like a toilet book and just be done with the whole entrepreneur advice. That smashed it.
Have you got any recommendations of things we should read or watch or listen to?
There was a book. No one will know this book, but it's by a guy called Dawood Alliance. I sort of know some of his family. It's called The Bazaar Life, and he came over from Iran, from the bazaars, not speaking English, and having to create a business and start going out and knocking on doors. And he built a huge textile business, and just always remember that his story of not knowing the language, knocking on doors, and finding places within his mind that he could go to in the hardest times, and it was fascinating to me. It helped me actually starting in the boxing side, and yeah, it's a fascinating book and an incredible story. So yeah, that book springs to mind.
Because it's almost the line. All you have to fear is fear itself. In a way, life, isn't it? It's like, you'll get pushed back on all the shit things, but you have to just keep going and just keep confident and just and you'll get there.
And I think all the answers, and this is one of the best advice I've ever had, is all the answers lie inside in you. It doesn't matter like how much going on around here and whatever and how many failures you have, but ultimately you can find every answer inside, and then that was something that he was a phenomenal at.
Solve the problem yourself almost.
Yeah,
and don't worry.
It's all
a mental exercise, just like a boxing fight.
Yeah,
really.
find your go-to.
Find your safe place.
Yeah, and
even if it's eating ice cream for like 2 hours when you get home,
that
crying,
sounds fine.
and then go, right, I feel better now. Okay, so you've done tremendously. Thank you, Ben. It's been fascinating to talk. So this is the end and our favorite part of the show. We're going to ask you a series of terms that are used in business, and you have to tell us whether you think they are business or bullshit. You may elaborate. We may challenge you. We may do whatever we want, and we're off.
Did you just stop yourself from swearing? That was quite impressive.
I keep muting myself. It's my new thing. Do you like it?
I do like it, yeah.
It's like a self-editing rapper.
Bootstrapped, funded yourself. So rather than getting investment.
Business.
Have you bootstrapped? Have you been raising money?
Oh, I've not raised anything really. We've taken a very small amount and just been very patient and practical. it might change in the future, but I do think it teaches a very good principle.
Are you always good at saving money and being disciplined?
No, don't get me wrong. I'm not definitely not like that. But I think it's important to prove to yourself and the business that you can run a business. I think there's a skill in running a business.
Do you have like, what do you do? Monthly management accounts? Do you have a good CFO?
I think I've just, again, not really in this early days, just almost having to. I mean, it's hard. I think maybe it was hard at the start, starting a boxing business to raise investment. I was just I guess it's just hustling and finding a way.
Yeah. Guerrilla marketing. Do you do any of that? That's like doing something outrageous, like boxing naked.
I think it probably does work. So I'd say business.
Not something I'd want to watch.
Boxing naked, come on.
Golden handshake.
Bullshit.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there.
That's paying people extra to arrive. Then you end up in a bidding competition with everyone. Yeah. And then, I mean, does it make them lazy? Anyway, sweat equity.
Business.
Yeah.
It's
a good way. Do you have lots of shareholders in your business or other partners?
Not really, but I do think it's the best. Yeah, it's the best way.
I always say, and don't give people stuff until they've performed.
Yeah.
Frankly. Family offices.
Well, I mean, it depends if you're on the receiving end, I guess. I don't know. I'd say it's part of business, isn't it? It is.
Part of life.
Yeah.
Whether these families should accumulate that much money and then, I guess, this is like maybe like almost like a boxing term, down rounds. You aware what that is?
No, go on.
That's when someone invests at £5 a share and then a year later you go back to do more money and they find out their shares are only worth £4 and everyone freaks out about it.
Well, that's tough on the investor, so that's have to be bullshit.
Yeah, because your investments may go down as well as up.
You could do a British boxing like down rounds where people just like downing pints and then having to box. You know, when the chess boxing thing was a thing.
Chess boxing.
Where they get people who play chess and then play
to
a
hit
round
each
of
other
boxing.
or slap each other or something.
I've seen that. Yeah.
Okay.
It would be hilarious to do the like Christmas special where they like down a pint, try and fight, and then down a pint, try and fight. I don't know how many pints.
Just darts?
Yeah, that is darts.
Language barriers. Don't really have them, do
you? Bullshit.
5-year forecasts.
You'll say bullshit, but I think it's good business. I'd say business just because, again, it goes to the big vision. Where do you want to be in 5 years?
Yeah. But you were saying you're not setting a vision for yourself.
I was saying that I don't have an end point.
Right.
Of course, we've got to a stage where we want to grow and we want to keep growing and we have accounts that show that, but no.
Free movement of people.
Business.
Don't straight.
I don't even know what this one is. What I sort of do, following investments.
What does that mean?
I guess what that means is follow on.
Yeah,
like
that's
people
bullshit.
that do an investment and then
I'll ask you a different one. Let's do Bitcoin. What do you think of Bitcoin?
You know what? For me, I'd have to say bullshit just because
you didn't get any.
No. I keep thinking I missed the boat and then something else happens, but no, bullshit.
I know we've got to keep our ears out for the next boat.
Yeah.
This is pretty crap one as well. Ratchets.
You have to explain these things.
So ratchets are where you effectively get the more valuable the company gets, the more the founder gets.
Oh, I like that one.
Like in a step
business.
thing.
Yeah, business.
Yeah, definitely
business. Incentivization.
Yeah. This has been a good education, actually.
Yeah.
From the rudimentary
we'll give you some follow-up notes, just on
Appreciate
investment things. Well, Ben, man, you've been an absolute pleasure. So thanks for doing that.
Hang on, you haven't given him a score.
I'm building up to it. I'm building up to it.
What do you mean a score?
Yeah, you get a score.
On that game?
Yeah.
Oh.
You would have tried harder, would have played it differently.
Tried harder,
you would have tried. You got 9,064 points. Yeah, that's in the scoreboard in the sky. it was there.
9,064. I don't even know whether that's high or low anymore.
The trouble is,
because you gave somebody like hundreds of thousands the other day.
It was a one-off. The trouble is, I'm hanging out with my 4-year-old son.
Yeah, but all they can answer is business or bullshit.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, he still get a score.
He just makes a fucking number up.
It's life. You did well.
Thank you.
Now, I'm also hanging out with a 4-year-old kid, and I don't know if you hang out with them, but my son, he talks about numbers all the time. He's like, how fast that car go, Dad? Is it going 9,150 miles? He keeps doing calculators, making me read out quadrillions. Anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. I had to work out what comes after a trillion. A quadrillion. And a quintillion. Anyway, nobody cares. So that was it. Thank you very much,
Plug.
Ben. Do you want to just tell the world about BOXXER? Where do I get it?
BOXXER.com.
With 2 X's.
That's easy.
BOXXER. Come to a show and you'll be
just one
you'll be
X.
surprised.
BOXXER.
No, BOXX.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, if you've not been to a boxing show, go to a boxing show. We've got a show this weekend at the O2.
Wow.
Expect it to be watched by over 1 million people in this country. It will come on after Manchester City against Arsenal on Sky Sports. So I'm sure this might go on after, actually.
So you've just missed
the
show.
You've just missed it.
It was great.
It was fantastic.
Absolutely fucking superb.
Who won? Who won, Ben?
Fraser Clark won in the 8th round. He knocked him out. Fingers crossed. No. But yeah, watch out on Sky Sports. You'll see us on there.
Boom.
Fantastic. So there you have it. That was this week's episode of Business Without Bullshit. And we'll be back with our quiz, Business or Bullshit, on Thursday. Until then,
It's ciao.